So, if you could please take your seats. Thank you. We know it's difficult after lunch. It's not easy to get your attention back. But if you could please take a seat, and if those people who are still outside could come back in. As I say, it's the post-prandial time. I hope you've enjoyed your lunch. But I do promise a very intense afternoon, but it's going to be very worthwhile if you can pay all of your attention to look at a new challenge that we've started already to talk a little bit about this morning, which is the economic challenge. And that's no mean feat. Is it possible? Is it really possible to talk about protecting the environment and in economic growth? Are both of those things together possible? Relagres not just believes it is possible, but more than that, we don't just want these two things to coexist. We don't just want that marriage, but we firmly believe that this union can bring up really profitable alternatives for both the economy and society. So we're going to be talking about that now, economic challenges. And firstly, to do so, we have Jaime Cataldo here, who's been an engineer in France. He's also worked as an executive and an advisor in regional development. He also has experience in local cities, government, and international bodies. He's currently general director of Emeres, a public company in Chile. And he's going to be talking about that balance between what's environmentally necessary and what's economically and socially viable in waste management models. Mr. Cataldo, you have the floor, sir.
Bueno, este es un tema que es muy complejo porque estuvimos buscando literatura en Emeres.
Very complex issue. I was looking for literature on this in Santiago, and we really haven't found all that much on this. So we've used some of our own sources, some from the central government, to come up with some data to be able to talk to you about what we could talk about comprehensive waste management and its impact on costs and investment and sustainable development. Just to give you a bit of background, we are a metropolitan region in Santiago de Chile. Emeres Sur is an association of companies, intermunicipal companies, comprising around 23 municipalities right now, and soon that'll go up to 30 in central southern area of Santiago. And right now we have 4.1 billion people, and we manage 2 million tons of waste per year. Emeres Sur has a situation that's different to Mexico, DF, different to Buenos Aires, different to Bogota, and it's very probably different to other cities in Latin America. Among other things, that's because in the city of Santiago and the metropolitan region, there are 54 municipalities, and we don't have one single city government. Among other things, that means that our situation is very different, and the way that waste is managed is very difficult from the outset. Also, a law on regionalization is being discussed in the country at the moment. It's very centralized at the moment, so we don't have a strong regional governmental structure. We don't have direct links with the public, and again, that is quite a difference to other cities. So, in that background, we have looked at this question: how can we generate governance in waste in the metropolitan region when there are 54 municipalities and when central and regional powers are very dispersed in this area? So we have a management model at EMERES and EMSUR that seeks to address this situation. And the model is characterized by the fact that we have agreements with many metropolitan stakeholders. We have agreements with universities, University of Santiago de Chile, University of Chile, and the Metropolitan Technological University, which give know-how, expertise on this. We also have framework agreements with private companies nationwide that allow us to address different types of waste. They put the company in the capital, and we put the waste to be treated appropriately. And in this model, we have a policy to be able to persuade, to seduce, if you like, our own central government and regional government, and also to be able to build and forge agreements and alliance in this ongoing search for a debate on public policies, which is, if I understand it correctly, what we're doing here this afternoon. So we've been really big drivers. We've had these 5 Relagres seminars already, and every year in Santiago we do at least 2 workshops for the municipality on this very topic. Another important aspect is that we really need to concern ourselves with sanitary landfill agreements in the municipal area, not only to seek a good development of contracts, but also auditing and technical monitoring on an ongoing. And one other thing that's perhaps the most salient issue in what we've done in the last few months is really what sets us apart when it comes to debates in previous years in these very same seminars. For the first time, after many years of seeking agreements, we have finally managed to find an association with private companies to be able to build 2 treatment plants in the southern part of Santiago de Chile. So what we've been after for years, we now have as an agreement signed and sealed. We have the initial documents signed anyway, and we're currently drawing up the environmental impact documentation, and we hope very much in the next 2 years we'll be able to start building these plants. Now that's going to entail a really big change for us, and will bring about public policy based on encouraging the public to treat waste firstly, and for us to carry out a separate collection and sending to appropriate treatment plants. So that's our management model as it stands right now. Now, we're also carrying out a study, because just last year when we were carrying out the seminar, the extended producer responsibility scheme was just being passed in Chile, and right now we are developing that model of associations, particularly for packaging, to respond to that. That law, which seeks to reduce waste generation and promote reuse and recycling, particularly when it comes to municipalities, will allow us to draw up agreements with the management system, which is going to be carried out by producers and importers, which is going to be the responsibility of the producers and importers. Now, these agreements will necessarily entail agreements between the 20 or 30 or so municipalities. And we'll also be able to draw up agreements with recyclers, grassroots recyclers. We're already working with them. We're going to be drafting an initial agreement in the coming months. And another important aspect is that we're going to amend bylaws to bring them in line with this public policy of separating waste at origin and having a separate collection. As you know, these are the main products that fall under this new law. Basically, we're most interested in collection of packaging. So, since the last few seminars, and even in last year's Congress in Conwat, we have heard quite a lot about the circular economy. And we have sat down to think about this, and we've taken it on as a new form of thinking and acting in our area, which is waste management. This has taken us to rethink the new waste management law, which I mentioned, and the law 19175, a constitutional law on this. But we are concerned because if we're really thinking about taking ownership of this philosophy of the circular economy, then we have to continue thinking that the circular economy is a new economy. It's a new model of society. It's not the consumer society that we know. And in short, it implies new customs and new habits amongst institutions and the public at large. So if we just take it as a comprehensive waste management, we can accept the basic precepts of the circular economy, but we realize actually that it goes far beyond our scope of waste management. If we didn't take it in the broadest sense, we would just be thinking of it as something that's an interesting idea, but it's not something that you can really actually apply. So we are making the commitment of accepting really the essence of the circular economy rather than just the idea of it. And as I said, we have really pushed for a public policy of separated waste collection. We're going to be using new technologies in our future projects. In April this year, we decided to push forward the 3 initial projects that we're committed to. We have 8 projects in total that we've committed to, which will treat 810,000 tons of waste per year, and that will lead us to an investment of around $219 million in the next 10 years. As I said, our management model is public-private, And it'll only be successful if we work with private companies and if they trust in us and they'll make this investment. So we have the first plant treating 150,000 tons. The second is 210,000 tons per year of dry organic fraction. And we have another project, the third project, for 150,000 tons of rubble that will go to authorized landfill. Now, with just those projects, we're around 600,000 of the total 810,000 that we've committed to treating. We're going to continue studying new proposals that we've received for plant 7 and 8 for the second evaluation stages and methanization also. Now, in keeping with what I was saying on the circular economy, and given the public policies that the Ministry of Environment has been applying since the REP law, we have moved away from incineration plants, not just because of the high costs, and I'll come back to costs in a moment, but in short because we don't think that you can eliminate waste that we're going to be separating at origin to use as waste to energy and to put them back into this new system. So we have a methanization plant and waste to energy also. Now, given that the first 3 projects are already underway, we hope that the subsequent ones won't pose any problems. Lastly, then, this is our projection of the 32 areas of the southern part of Santiago. We're going to be generating around 2.8 million tons of waste. And if we achieve our targets, we'll be treating 29% of the waste that's generated by municipalities. And the rest that would go to landfill would be around 2 million tons. There. Next year, again, we're going to increase our participation in waste treatment to up that percentage to 36%. And again, by 2040, we want to reach 51%. Now, this is relevant because also in coming years, the contracts that we have with sanitary landfills will be coming to an end. We've been very transparent with them and the consortiums that operate them. We've told them that our proposal is to move forward in the next 30 years in reducing the amount of tons that are sent to landfills and increasingly boost the curve of treatment and recycling. So that debate is going to take place right at the time when I imagine we're building these plants. So that's going to be the new reality for us, because prior to this, our policy was simply final disposal of waste as a public policy, in our case, unfortunately, and in the case of the country as a whole. Now, we're talking about here the circular economy again. The European Economic Community is assessing the impact of that on European GDP, whereas we're talking about a very specific case, but we have drawn up these calculations for our plant and packaging of 150,000 tons per year, and we've concluded that the various savings that this treatment entails has a significant saving impact of $500 million in 20 years. Now, you don't obtain that impact immediately, but it does come in with water savings, with savings in trees that have to be cut down, energy that's used over the course of all of these years. And these are certainly values to be taken into account. Now, unfortunately, savings in greenhouse gas emissions is less, but just for this plant, we've calculated that as a saving of 267 per year, which will be saved. Now, drawing to a close, coming to the issue of city costs. Based on analyzing these 32 municipalities, at the moment, figures for 2016, we're roughly spending $127 million in collection, sanitation collection, and disposal. Total tons disposed 2.4 million, and that's about $53 per ton. Now, when we've analyzed the projects that we've approved and are operating, we've come to interesting conclusions. The first plant 150,000 tons a year, which will have an investment of $93 million. The gate fee is zero cost, which is immediate saving for the municipality, quite a big one, and economic profit for the municipality of $23 million over the 20 years of the project's life cycle. But the saving will also be $60 million by avoiding disposal in sanitary landfills. And that's those are important figures there. And it's project 2, the methanization plant, which has 210,000 tons a year, investment for $41 million. There is a gate fee there of $15.3 per ton, which is the average that we pay per ton and final disposal in sanitary landfill. But that economic profit is, in terms of development of the plant, will be $14 million. In project 3, which is a policy of not taking 150,000 tons of rubble per year to sanitary landfill, but rather to specialist rubble landfill, which will treat it as such, the saving there will be $32 million. So, by driving forward this policy, it's not just the right public policy. We're not just contributing to the environment. We're not just working to tackle climate change, but also, and significantly for mayors and others here present, we are looking after the city's coffers, because we know that there are significant deficits in those right now. So in 20 years, the saving for the municipality will be $82 million and a profit of $37 million. Now, if you look at the figures in Europe, you might say these figures are small fry, but for us, compared to zilch today, or the deficit we have right now, this is significant, both financially and environmentally speaking. We have $127 million in expenses. We're going to be investing $134 in those first 3 projects. The impact of projects on the circular economy will be $500. Savings of $82 million and direct benefits of $37 million. Those are the figures that we're dealing with at the moment. Now, and coming to a close now, this confirms both EMERES and EMSUR that we must galvanize this management model that we are building right now, which is an associative model, intermunicipal. It's theme-based, it's comprehensive, and above all, it is public-private. That's what we're doing, and that's what we want to consolidate to ensure that all of this is finally possible. Now, we're facing 3 major challenges over the next 10 years here. Renegotiating or renovating the contracts that we have with the 2 sanitary landfills right now. We want them to continue working. We need to set ourselves up as a managing body of the RAP law, and also to push forward these private investors in waste management. To achieve all of this, we especially need, in our country, we don't have an overall waste management law, and that is necessary because, among other things, in our regions, 80% of the population doesn't pay for sanitation, disposal, collection, and certainly not waste treatment. And in municipalities, that causes big holes in the budget, and very often it doesn't allow us to up our standards to provide better service, which our communities certainly need. And last, but very much not least, one important thing in our management model, and that's why we're here in Mataró this afternoon, we believe that it's vital to continue working with municipal associations between Chile, Bolivia, Argentina, and so on, with consortiums and European associations. We've just gone on a tour around Europe, and that alone has really shown that we are on the right path. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, señor Cataldo. Nos quedamos ahora en Europa, en concreto en España, porque ahora mismo vamos a conocer las tecnologías y otras herramientas que están precisamente al servicio de la gestión de residuos desde la perspectiva de una ciudad de referencia, como lo es, en este caso, Barcelona. Lo vamos a hacer en compañía de Carlos Vázquez, formado en Ingeniería Agrónoma por la Universidad Politécnica de Cataluña. Él es experto en la gestión de servicios medioambientales, gestión de residuos y limpieza viaria, tanto en el ámbito privado como en el público. Es actualmente director de los servicios de limpieza y gestión de residuos del Ayuntamiento de Barcelona. Así que, señor Carlos Vázquez, le escuchamos.
Tengo un problema.
I've got a problem.
Iba a decir, tenemos.
Well, I was going to say we've got a problem, but my problem is that I don't understand the title of my presentation. I'm going to read it to you. Management Systems, an analysis of the tools that internalize costs and divide efforts. So I still don't understand it. Look, 6 months back, Leandro Martin called me and he said, Carlos, we've got this very interesting symposium. Please, would you like to take part in it? And I said, well, Leandro, I'm delighted, to take part in it. But please, you give me the title. A month ago, I saw the program and I read the title of my talk. And in truth, the first thing I did, and this is real, I picked up the phone and I called him. I said, Leandro, you're joking, aren't you? And Carlos, no, I want you to talk about this, that, and the other. And, while he was talking, I switched off because, I saw things weren't going the right way. So I said, look, if I can talk about whatever, I mean, nobody's going to understand that title. So, I talk about whatever I want. And secondly, a good strategy. Put on a video, So you put on a video, time goes ticking by, and that's it. You don't have to talk. So let's have the video up, please.
600 metres remaining. Gebri Selassie, who's done an awful lot of this pacemaking. He knows that it's inevitable that this man, Bakila, will beat him one day. But he said to me the other day, I don't want him to be in Paris. I don't want him to be yet. He's got plenty of time ahead of him. And this is one of my last chances. This is a brave man, he's a proud man, and he is the king of Ethiopia in every sense. Coming down the home straight, 1 lap to go. When's he going to move? Is he going to allow Bakila to go past him, or is he going to try and make a move first? He'll hear the bell, and a reaction from Gebri Selassie. Is there anything left? 9,600 metres, 25.54. They're going to run sub 27 minutes in this race, which is absolutely incredible. It's a test of strength, but who has the speed?
They've both got speed. They've both got super speed. Gebre Selassie has run sub 25 in the past to win this title, but look at the young man on his shoulder, Bekele. Gebre Selassie with that definitive style, the right arm where he used to carry books when he was a youngster, born in the same place as Bekele, and now the young man strikes for home. Has Gebre Selassie got anything left? The emperor is beaten. We're going to have a new king from Ethiopia. Here he comes. Kenenisa Bekele unleashes a phenomenal sprint into the home straight. Gebre Selassie still running strong. This is a brilliant, brilliant run. It's going to be gold for Ethiopia. It goes to the young man. It goes to the youngster. It goes to Bekele. Gebre Selassie takes the silver. What a race. What a performance. It's going to be bronze as well for Ethiopia. Sihen will take the bronze. A 1, 2, 3 for the greatest running nation on the world.
Pero es la final del Campeonato del Mundo de Atletismo, 10.000 metros.
The 10,000 meters in Paris, it was the last 800 meters that we saw. They go round the stadium 25 times. We saw the last 2 laps. And why does he win, Bekele? And why doesn't Selassie win? What 2 arguments, what tactics does the young guy use? He was the world champion for cross. The other guy was the Olympic champion. But why does Bekele win? Because of 2 strategies he uses. First, during the whole race, he keeps up a good pace, a devastating pace. All of the rivals were left behind except 3, the 3 Ethiopians. At the end there were just 2, but there were 3. Is that enough to win? No. Keeping up a good pace isn't enough to win. You need an extra strategy, and the strategy is a good final sprint. This allows him to push and win the race. So, a good working pace and a final sprint are 2 of the traits that the waste collection or cleaning services need in a city like Barcelona. So, if I've got to talk about waste management, I'm going to start with this. 2 qualities that the services require. Routine, a good pace, a good working pace, to know exactly what we have to do every day, to do it constantly. But that's not enough, because things go on in cities, unforeseen things, and sometimes we need a final sprint. So we need arguments, we need instruments, we need resources so that at a given time we can take off on that sprint. Okay, now let's go on to my presentation. Can we have it back up now, please? Thank you. If we talk about management, public service management, there are 3 factors we must bear in mind. The first, regardless of the form of management, private, public, what you can never delegate, what you can never outsource is management. The overall management has to be in the hands of the city hall. Decisions can never be outsourced. You can ask experts, you must do so, get advice, but the decision we have to take ourselves in the administration, because otherwise interests are diluted. I've heard people talking about cooperation, private-public agreements and things. Great, fantastic model, but the decisions have to be taken by the City Hall, by the public administration. Obviously, we need to align interests between the different administrations, the public corporations. If we don't do that, if we're not all pulling together in the same way, at the end of the day, the services are affected. And then, to play with the competition. The corporations, there's enough corporations in the market to compete. And that's what we've got to do. We've always got to, play with what we can do in the administration, confrontation, but not always confrontation, because that causes friction, but cooperation. That's where we must play every day within these fields. Another important thing to direct, we need to know, because you cannot take a good decision if you're not aware of what you're deciding on, and thus you need to know what you're talking about. Look, we in the cleaning and collection department, there's 30 of us. No, I exaggerate, 25. In the city, we have 4,500 workers from 4 companies, cleaning, collecting the garbage. How do we know what's going on in the city if there's 25 of us and we spend all day sitting in the office writing reports? So we need instruments, indicators, management tools. They'll be good or bad. But the most important thing is for them to tell you something which you can interpret and take a decision. We have even outsourced services which inspect what the cleaners are doing. We even have people in plain clothes who go round the city looking at what's going on, and they tell us. That's what we need, inside information, to know what's going on and what is going to happen. Everything we can anticipate will benefit our service. Control. Jose was talking about victory. When we talk about public services, I tend to put on this picture that, power without control is no use. So you can have very powerful services, but if they're not adequately controlled, they're no use. And when we say control, I mean control in the rendering of services. We in the municipal services need to know what's going on. We need to ensure that what we plan and organize from the office actually happens out there in the street. Technology is a great help to us. We have GPSs, tags, we have warning systems, alarms, many instruments, technological instruments that help us to control our services. And then, above all, there has to be, if we outsource, progressive economic repercussions to ensure that people do things as has been agreed. Okay? Okay, this is the second part of my presentation. This is a picture taken by Isaac Cordal, who's a Galician artist who works with miniatures, and he puts them in different spaces. This was in Berlin, and it's politicians arguing about climate change. That's what it's called. I don't know. I mean, we're here to talk about circular economy. And talking about the circular economy, I wanted to start by talking about services. If we don't have good, efficient, quality public services, we can talk as much as we want about recycling, but people will only be concerned with their container, their dirty street. They won't care about things in general. So, first of all, we talk about services. Then we should talk about 2 examples of how we can use the fiscal system or the economy to improve the circular economy. Look, I don't know if there's any climate change deniers here in the hall. No? Nobody? Okay, so I'll skip this one. Then the 2 main examples that I want to talk about are, first and foremost, everyday examples, local ones for us, Barcelona, the collection of waste in Barcelona, and then a reflection on integrated management systems. Now look, in Barcelona, there's a double route. There's the domestic and the business one. The businesses are given, the domestic are given different coloured bins, and we collect them individually. Business. This is business. Why economic activities? Because they're the ones that generate most waste. So with less effort, we can collect more garbage. So if we start talking about selective collection, if we've got the force, we've got the capacity, we can attack them all. We can attack business and home. But if we're weak, if we don't have resources, then let's go for that which gives us most for least effort, which is the business side of things. So this is, what our model was in Barcelona. What does it permit us to do? The business collection, apart from separating the flows, it means that we can incorporate technology, container technology. We can tag them, we can see who separates and who doesn't. And then it also permits us to apply a fiscal system, a differential fiscal system for those that select their waste and those that don't. So we can give them some kind of bonus for doing so, and if they don't, we can penalize them. People understand this. When you actually affect people's pocket, then they understand you. That's what we did. We developed a fiscal policy aimed at our businesses so that those that do select the waste collection is cheaper than for those that don't. And to ensure that people don't cheat, what we do is educate. We have inspectors, educators, people who are constantly going round the businesses or shops, reminding them what their obligations are. What have we achieved with this? We've achieved selective collection of greater quality, which is also important. Here we talk a lot about waste processing, and this is fundamental, the condition in which the waste comes to our recycling plants. And then we also ensure that those that do not recycle pay most. This, for example, is a picture of the 100 educators that we have out in the street talking to our citizens and businesses here in Barcelona, because unless we remind people of their obligations, it's hard to achieve this, particularly in terms of business and shops, because there's a high turnover of staff. This has worked for us. Secondly, you'll see that there are less pictures, there's more writing, so we're going to have to think a little bit harder. You can see this. What's the idea of this slide? I've done it like this deliberately, because this is tougher. Integrated management systems. The idea of he who pollutes pays, the responsibility of the producer. I mean, if I've got time, I'll read the regulations. I don't know if I'm going to read it or not. No. Look, in Catalonia, we have these management systems at the moment with these materials. If I've forgotten any of them, don't worry. I'm sure that somebody's going to call me on the phone to say I've forgotten them. But what I seek to convey? Is this working? Isn't it? What are the principles that we need to take with us, and where do we need to go back to our roots? Okay, so first of all, when you set up an integrated management system, we need geographical uniformity. We're a large city, 1.6 million inhabitants. We could have established an agreement just with them and obtained economic benefits. Now, it doesn't make sense. What we need is a territorial unit, the whole of Catalonia. We all benefit from all of the advantages together, the smaller, larger towns, whatever. The principle of solidarity, not, because I've got the biggest economic clout, I'm going to be better. No. So, geographical uniformity. Secondly, on negotiating financial conditions, we must not forget that we need to bear in mind all costs. And I say all costs. I mean all costs. With the way the Act is written, the agreements are written, we're always raising our hands saying, oh, we're missing this, that, and the other, and it's very difficult to include it later on. So always in our relationship with integrated management systems, there's always problems that we drag along from the past. We didn't do this, that, or the other. So if you've got time, include everything, and everything means everything. Statistics drawn up by the administration. The saying, there's truth, lies, and statistics. That's the same. Integrated management systems talk about 78% of selective collection. But, in the administration, we're talking about 30-40% of selective collection. Something's wrong there. We're not looking at the same thing. So it's important that we all say the same. Be it good, be it bad. But we've got to tell the truth, please. If we start fighting over figures, then something is drastically wrong, okay? Look, flexibility. It's very important. I mean, in all models, you reach a limit. If that is below your level of expectations, then we need to change our model. Models are valid until they reach their extreme. So we need flexibility in our models, in our agreements, in the pacts we make, in integrated management systems, because if not, we take our own standpoint. Oh, yeah, I've done what I was meant to do. I've achieved my goals, and that's it. So we need flexibility, and we need to be able to adapt our management model. The citizens understand materials, not products. This is confusing. Everybody is concerned with their own thing. People don't necessarily know whether it's plastic, metal. They do know that it's plastic, metal, or glass. They don't know what kind of plastic, what kind of metal, what kind of glass it is. So, if we can work with this far better. And lastly, pyramids in the hierarchy of waste, cooperation with integrated management systems at times, we forget about preventing the generation of waste. This should be the principle that draws us all together, first and foremost, to include then certain conditions to start to talk and demand integrated management systems seriously. Thus, with all of this, I don't mean that integrated management systems are bad. No, they've allowed us to advance, and to advance greatly, and to be able to get all of the resources that we need. But that's established by the law. So what I'm saying is that if we'd had to start today, then maybe we would have started in a different way. Not with integrated management systems, but they are good systems. Okay? Now, lastly, I would like you just to take 3 ideas away with you. First, from what I've said, to talk about circular economy, about recycling and good public services. Without them, the debate will go another way. 2, there are financial instruments within our grasp, not ideal ones, but fiscal measures which will permit us to advance with selective collections. One of them is our relationship with integrated management systems, which are good management systems, but which need to align their interests. Thank you all very much for your attention.
Muchísimas gracias, Carlos Vázquez.
Very much, Carlos Vázquez. She has a degree from University of Barcelona, more than 20 years experience in Catalan public government. She's currently director of the circular economy area of waste prevention in the Catalan Waste Agency. Madam Pilar Chiva is going to be telling us about what the Catalan government is doing to improve its waste management strategies. Thank you.
Buenas tardes a todo el mundo. Quería dar las gracias a la organización por darnos la oportunidad.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much, especially to the organizers, for the invitation to tell you about what the Catalonia Waste Agency is doing, particularly with regards to prevention and the circular economy. For those of you who don't know us, our agency is a public agency under the regional government of Catalonia, and it's a sustainability department which has competence over waste that's generated and treated in Catalonia. The program is called PRECAT 20. And it's a prevention and management program, and I want to underscore the word prevention there, of waste and resources, and again I want to underscore the word resources there, in Catalonia going up to 2020. Those are 2 big steps forward. The fact that we have prevention and resources in the very title sets out a line, and here I've put down the mission of the program, which is to set out the action strategy of the regional government of Catalonia in waste prevention and management up to 2020, and the perspective of efficient use of resources and favouring a circular economy and low-carbon economy that's competitive and generates new activities. That sets out our strategy for the next few years. Waste shouldn't be seen as a biblical plague or a curse upon us. We want to really buck that trend and focus policies on seeing waste as resources. And our next program, our next law, perhaps, as we've seen in other countries, tomorrow we're hearing from Flanders and Belgium, our idea is that it be a program of resources, not waste. These are words, and sometimes we get hung up on the words, but they're important. I'm going to give you an overview of what we're doing here in Catalonia. Tomorrow, José María Tos, our director, is going to be giving a broader view of waste management in Catalonia. I'm just going to focus on prevention and circular economy. Firstly, circular economy. I don't want to go into this too much. It's not really the right time of day for philosophical debates, but I would like to just mention a definition, and especially the definition that the Ellen MacArthur Foundation uses, because this is really at the heart of the message I want to convey. It states that circular economy is by design, and I want to stress that word, design, as reparatory and regenerative. If we really want to move from a linear economy that we have basically now, around 99%, to a circular economy, we have to devise, design, and change and make these disruptive changes so that we can continue to enjoy growth, economic activity, and so forth with intensive use of resources, and we generate increasing quantities of waste. This is an economic concept. It's often well received by companies and economic sectors. Here we don't see green economy or sustainable economy, those terms that are sometimes a bit less easy to digest. So this circular economy idea is being very well received, as we've heard from the representative of the European Commission. They've set up a raft of measures in the circular economy, and I think amongst us all, we really can bring about the change that will create this circular economy. Now, the public authorities have to basically allow this to happen, to push a little bit, but above all, not to block it, not so that companies don't encounter stumbling blocks when they come to applying what they need for these changes. Now, very often it is, when we talk about the circular economy, often we think about waste treatment, but it does involve a lot more than that. We think that we would be failing if we push forward this only from waste treatment or environmental departments. Really, we need the involvement of all sectors, but within government, we need stakeholders that are that work with innovation, internationalization, and others. And that's what we're trying to do in Catalonia. And it's not easy. Unfortunately, public authorities aren't really very used to working in this way, in cross-cutting way. But we have to do it, and because if we don't, we're not going to achieve it. So this is just what we do at regional government level. Here are all of the bodies, this list of bodies that are engaged in this. We have a strategy to push forward the green economy and circular economy. We also have a Catalan strategy for eco-design and for a circular economy and eco-innovative economy. And we have a general prevention and waste management program. So this is what we have. How do we do it? How do we make sure this all makes things happen? So moving from philosophy, I'm now going to talk about what we're actually doing. And here in Catalonia, we've looked very often at what is being done elsewhere in Europe and the world. We've replicated things that work. And specifically, the waste program, focusing on prevention, as I said. In 2020, we've set a goal to generate 15% less waste than in 2010. We've seen other stats and figures today, and I think we do need to set goals in waste reduction. We need to set specific goals per flow or sector. We need to increase knowledge of reusable and second-hand supply. That's another important change. We need to foster eco-design strategies, extend the useful life of products, and give economic incentives for best practices. Now, for some specific flows, I won't read this out because it's a bit long and you can consult the presentation afterwards, I think. But just to give you an overall idea, we have a goal on reducing food waste like the Commission talked about. We've got another program on reuse of bags, plastic bags with handles. This is important. It's symbolically, it's important, especially at a level of urban litter. We want to try and move away from single-use bags to reusable bags and other aspects. Now, this is the situation. This is our dirty laundry, if you like. Here you can see generation of waste per capita. You can see from as around 2007, more or less, that started to drop. It's very likely linked to the economic crisis that we've undergone in this country. In the last 2 years, we're seeing that line is picked up again. Now, that's not going hand in hand with the economic recovery, so we hope that economic growth is going to be separated from waste generation. So what are we doing then in prevention, which is part of the circular economy? Just an overview again, because I don't want to get told off for bad timekeeping. Planning. We think that planning prevention is essential. We're used to planning management and not so much prevention. It's important that any measures are not one-off or sporadic or ad hoc. We think it's important that local authorities carry out proper prevention planning, and we've come up with a raft of tools. We have a manual for local prevention plans. We have a prevention calculator, which helps local bodies to choose the measure that they can best set up locally and what type of goals they can set. So that all starts with planning. Payment per generation, as we've heard from Carlos this morning. Until we have to pay, sometimes it's difficult for people to actually really change what they're doing. In Catalonia, we've had many communications campaigns over the years, and we've seen that part of the population won't really do anything unless their wallet will be directly hit. So in selective collection and prevention, those are two important aspects. And this system can help us move forward there. So again, we think it's an essential tool. And we have another manual on that. On reuse and preparation for reuse, we have also measures. We've heard a little bit about the circular economy, which stresses very much the technological cycle. On the one hand, you've got extending products' life cycle, repairability, also remanufacturing, reuse, and other concepts. Some are older than others, some are newer. But really, what we have to do is to really attach value to reuse of products. Now, how can we do this practically? Like other aspects, I think we have moved forward in Catalan society, at least in the last few years. People are starting to appreciate buying devices or washing machines or whatever that'll last longer. We're all a bit sick of buying printers and other pieces of equipment that, break the day after the guarantee finishes. So people are starting to assess and appreciate that more. Reuse also. How can we encourage the public to reuse things? And we think we have a broad network, a wide network of what we call clean points. We've made huge efforts to make these accessible to the public so that people can take things for reuse. And we think that that network can be also a network of points where people can take things not just for recycling but also for reusing. As I said, we want to make sure that there's no legal constraint so that these types of points can be used for people to take games or toys, books, whatever, piece of furniture that they're not going to use more. And if I know that that I take that there, somebody else is going to use it. And that's very important. We've also published a manual on reuse and preparation for reuse. And all of these publications are available online. You have the link also in the presentation as well for most of them. If you can't find any of them, please do contact me. And we're trying to help city councils to solve any legal and technical constraints that they may have in promoting reuse and preparation for reuse in municipal areas like these clean points. And I'd like to say that in Spain, the last royal decrees on electrical and electronic equipment and vehicles, for the first time, we now have specific goals on preparation for reuse. I think that's a significant turning point for us. Now, another area, and again, another one where I think awareness has changed in recent years in Catalonia is reducing food waste. In 2010, from our waste agency, in conjunction with the Autonomous University of Barcelona, we decided to quantify food waste generation in Catalonia. And this is the figure we came up with: 262,000 tons of food that was being chucked in the bin every year. And if you split that into inhabitant, that's about 35 kilos per person per year. Now, that really shone a light on this problem, which is an environmental problem. And it was a real catalyzer. We've seen a huge increase in awareness amongst bodies, amongst companies even, the public at large, on this. And a lot of projects are being set up to really try and avoid this huge waste. 35 kilos per person per year is the food that's wasted in households, in shops, as well as restaurants and public bodies. We haven't yet measured food waste in primary sector and agro-food. Now, we've seen that of that, 50% more or less of that food waste comes from households. So just to give you an example, we came up with a citizen initiative campaign to raise awareness of this. It's called Som Gent de Profit, which means in Catalan, we want to use things. We want to, let's say, waste not, want not, we might say in English. So we've seen this change, and it has come about. When you went to a restaurant in Catalonia, you didn't very often see people getting a takeaway of their food if they had leftovers, and that's quite common nowadays. Reduction in consumerism. Again, there's been a big change. And I want to show you with all this that sometimes it seems difficult to measure, but we are seeing over the years that there have been changes in habits, and plastic bags are another good example of that. In 2007, there was around 7 million inhabitants. Each week, we were using 45,000 plastic bags every week. So we're starting to put figures on this. 2007. Sometimes a figure does really show a reality and raise awareness. So we started working on this in agreement with distribution companies, all other stakeholders. We signed a first agreement on plastic bags 2009. We saw this reduction. We halved that figure through an agreement with major supermarkets, particularly, starting to charge for plastic bags. And again, it comes back to hitting people's wallets, even if it's just 2 cents or 5 cents. We managed to halve the figure of plastic bag use. We not only saw this dramatic reduction in plastic bag use, but we saw that in smaller shops, and here small corner shops are quite important and are widespread, where we saw that they could decide, or they had to decide, and they perhaps decided not to hit their customers, we found that there was an increase in plastic bag use. So this year, we have now passed a law banning free distribution of plastic bags. So smaller shops are no longer able to decide whether to charge or not, but they actually have to charge. This is something that we were asked to, especially small shopkeepers were saying, we were struggling to charge our customers, help us out and make it illegal to give them free plastic bags. So that's what we've done. And it's symbolic, this idea of reusing. It's about having the idea of using things more and having more awareness of other disposable products. Another example, which has had a big impact, the European Waste Prevention Week. This is a Europe-wide project. We were involved from the outset in Catalonia in creating and designing the European Week. And by 2016, we've had 43 regions from 32 countries participating. This is a week at the end of November. And we've tried to carry out a lot of activities related to selective collection and prevention to have a greater impact and to be more covered in the media and so on. There were 130 activities carried out in Catalonia then last year related to waste prevention. Obviously, we didn't organize them all ourselves, but rather schools, companies, local authorities, all worked together to carry out these activities. And linked to that project, in May, the second weekend in May, 12th to the 14th of May this year. This was the 4th year running of a project called Let's Clean Up Europe. And again, it's a weekend in which we organize cleaning activities, either going to a natural habitat, a beach, a river, a forest, and volunteer to pick up waste and litter that they find. The aim of these activities isn't really the actual cleaning that has a limited impact, but rather to raise awareness. People who take part in this type of activity see the damaging effect of waste on the natural environment, and that will very probably change the way they throw away waste and the way they separate waste. There were 186 activities involving over 8,000 volunteers this year in Catalonia. And lastly, I want to just give you a quick overview of other activities which don't so much involve public involvement or don't seek to act directly upon the public, but rather industry, just to show you the broad range of our activities. Industrial symbiosis is something I'm sure you've heard about. The idea is a business strategy to improve efficiency of resource use in a specific area. And the idea is to allow industries to buy, sell, share, donate resources that third parties can use. There could be material resources, byproducts, resources that are lost, such as residual heat, unused resources, such as rainwater, or resources that can be shared, like transport, warehousing, and so on. It's a clear example of the circular economy. It has a series of advantages. And what we're seeing in Catalonia is a mushrooming of projects on this. There was a pilot project that started a couple of years ago in Manresa, and we're seeing that a lot of local bodies and authorities, not just in the sphere of environment or waste treatment, but rather of innovation and industry, are getting on board and getting behind this type of project. The Eco-Design Award in Catalonia. And when we talk about prevention, we can't just talk about waste, but rather we must also talk about products. As the definition of circular economy says, we're talking about design here. And since 2001, we have given an award, an Eco-Design Award that for products that are being developed in the pipeline or that are already being marketed that have eco-design characteristics. We think it's a way of recognizing and giving incentive to this type of strategy and will help to extend eco-design of products. And very lastly is the Rewine project. This is quite a recent European project financed by the LIFE program. And a pilot project was done on collection and reuse of wine bottles in the wine growing industry in Catalonia. There's no reuse of wine bottles at the moment in our country. There are experiences in other countries. There has been some use of carver bottles. And there are uses of other bottles, but not for wine bottles so far. So we have this project involving wineries, restaurants, distributors, clean points, and so on. And the only bottle cleaning plant that there still is in Catalonia. Before there used to be quite a lot more. We think it's a very interesting project, and we think it's going to give us a good perspective on reuse of this type of bottle. The Catalan Waste Agency has grants for local bodies as well as non-profit making and universities and companies for all of these types of project. They might be projects that are entailing change, things that are difficult to get off the ground, and that need the authorities to help them get over that initial implementation barrier. And that's what the aim of these subsidies are. And as I say, both local bodies and companies. Another tool that the local authorities have is public procurement. We've been talking about public procurement for years, but if we really want the market to change, then public authorities have to change the way we buy first and foremost. If we want to bring about a circular economy, we have to look at our procurement, the services that we contract, with a view to fostering the circular economy. That's all from me. Thank you very much. I'll be delighted to answer any questions you may have.
Muchísimas gracias, Pilar Chiva, Carlos Vázquez.
Thank you very much, Pilar Chiva, Jaime Cataldo. And Pilar, you've left things in the air. So if you've got any questions, I think it would be a good occasion to interact with them. We've got the experience of Santiago and of Catalonia, Barcelona. It's a question of sharing different realities to achieve a common viewpoint. So then if we could have a microphone for the gentleman there, further forward, please. Could you raise your hand so that they can see where you are, so that the young lady can find you, please? Good afternoon. My name is David Lopez. I work for MDL Limited, and I'd like to ask the Catalan speaker with regard to whether you have financial results of the application of the circular economy. It's important to analyze the financial results. Could you tell me anything about that? Okay, so the microphone here, please. Well, excuse me. Sorry. I was very loud. We don't have any studies that say what the economic results are of the circular economy in Catalonia. We have very little, in fact, on it at the moment. We're looking at changing our model. There are concepts that we've been using for 30 years, but there are others which are newer, for which we still have no results. There are studies, if you look at the American Foundation website, there are things about the possible repercussions of the circular economy in terms of work. It also talks about forecasts. I think we had some figures this morning, but I think we're still talking about, basically just that, forecasts. Then we need company by company analysis. There are companies that have changed their models, and I think that could be beneficial. For example, Philips implementing a new model. They've stopped selling light bulbs, and what they sell is light. So they own the bulb itself, and it's a business line which is growing. It obviously, I would think, would have a positive economic balance at the end of the day. Sorry, with the City Hall, because the cost of advertising and things, that's what I'm referring to. If there are results, it's all validated. If you're talking about waste management, we have to compare how much it costs to go to the landfill, how much it costs to recycle. A sanitary landfill is obviously the cheapest option, so comparatively it's going to cost a lot. We need to turn things round. So tomorrow, the manager of the waste services is going to talk to us about, what we did is, as of 2004, we started charging a tax on the landfills and a tax for incineration per ton of waste. And that is returned to the different councils, depending. So it's a question of, the carrot and the stick. When we started to apply this kind of strategy, the figures change, and what we need is for it to be attractive economically to guarantee selective collection. Where a landfill is the cheapest option, it's going to be harder.
Desde los entes locales, evidentemente, estamos muy preocupados por los balances económicos.
In the administration, we're obviously concerned about the economic balance, but that is not the only form of measurement that we have. The CO2 emissions are another element that we have to bear in mind. The generation of jobs is another concept that we have to bear in mind, and here I think that's where the circular economy is going to win. And then too, one of my bosses who's sitting here in the front row, it's also, he says, a question of ethics. The circular economy, he says, is a question of ethics. So however you look at it, it's a vital issue. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, any further questions that you would like to raise? Okay, so let's thank our three speakers, Pilar Shiva, Carlos Vázquez, and Jaime Cataldo. Okay, now we're going to go on to the final, thank you, to the final block of today. So please do not leave the room, please. Okay, please resume your seats. No, there's no break now on the program. You seem to be very keen to get up and go, but no. Please do not leave the hall now. No, I'm telling you, I'm looking at you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, come on, give me a hand. Go out and tell the people outside to come back and sit down because we're going to carry on. So please, please, do forgive me, okay? That's what happens, you know, once you've got the microphone in your hand, you're in charge. Okay, now it's up to me, so we're going to go on to the final stage. There's no break. This is the final straight of today, the final challenge, a very important one, the social challenge. The question of waste, we've talked about this all day long. It's a shared responsibility. And we need to change the mindset. We need to understand the concept of garbage as waste. We have to see it as being a useful residue, a profitable residue, a subproduct. So in this respect, we're going to hear from Ramon Rebella, Giovanni Gemio, and we're going to finish with José Luis Gallego. So could we ask the three speakers please to take the stage, and let me first introduce you to Ramon Rebella. He's a doctor in ecology from the Autonomous University of Barcelona. Since 2008, he's led the Climate Change and Sustainability Office of Barcelona City Hall. He coordinates, controls and follows the change of model of waste collection of our municipalities. So please do resume your seats. And so, Ramon Rebella, from the point of view of the local councils, tell us about how we face this challenge and how we're going to battle climate change from the point of view of the public services, okay? So, good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. First and foremost, I would like to ask forgiveness for my presentation. I was preparing it yesterday, and domestic accidents have left us all rather sad, not very dynamic. I haven't got the graphs that I wanted to have. I did have a video to show you, as my colleague Vasquez showed you. The video in itself, was good enough for a whole talk. I had one by Eugenio, a comedian, which was pertinent, but I'm afraid we are not able to do it. So this is a presentation with lots of words and not very many images. So please forgive me, because this isn't the way that one should do it. So, as my title says, I've got to deal more with the area of climate change from the point of view of the public services. Climate change is an issue which, in general terms, with certain exceptions, it's true, is something that people have taken on board, has entered into our everyday language. And when a terminology permeates language, you come to a time when it becomes rather banal, as has occurred with other terms such as interculturality, sustainability itself, where anything is labeled with it, and it would seem to lose a lot of its meaning. So, on the one hand, I need to talk to you from my point of view. I work at Barcelona County Council, so my workspace is a small territory, highly populated, but compared to other territories, it's very little populated. The population of Barcelona is equivalent to some of the cities that have come to speak to us, the whole of the province of Barcelona. So we're talking about a very different scale. At all events, it's a dynamic territory, one which has an area of activity which goes beyond the local issue and is involved in combating climate change. So our public services, how do I go on to the next slide? I'm sorry, I didn't inform myself as to how things work. Okay. So as I was saying, there's a lot of text. I'm afraid no pictures. This is a slide we could do without. It talks about, the services which local authorities have to offer, and in bold, I've underscored those that are related to climate change: public lighting, waste collection, street cleaning, the supply of drinking water, drainage systems. I would imagine that all over the world you have regulations like this. But just summarizing, the obligatory services, which is what I've got to talk about here, the public services, which are important in terms of mitigation, are basically the collection and processing of waste, which often, well, not often, always is the biggest contract that any local authority would have, at least everywhere else except for here. And that's the lion's share of municipal contracts. It's important in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, even though on a global level it's not comparable to sectors such as transport, industry, home consumption. It is of a significant weight in terms of greenhouse gas, particularly with the production of methane, which is the most active in climate change. More even than CO2. Then the local water cycle, public lighting to which we would have to add to the energy bill of the local authorities. We're talking about the lighting of, town hall is not considered a public service. So, if that's done directly by the municipal authority, then it is not, it does have to, have VAT added, but if it's a public service, it doesn't. And then we have adaptation to climate change. So we've got the water cycle, then civil protection and fire extinction, and then urban environment is another free but important service. Now, what comes next is a bit like as if it were the data from the University of Wisconsin or whatever, but it's the result of the work of the Barcelona Protection Against Climate Change office and other environmental offices. Basically, the work hinges around action plans for sustainable energy and climate based on the Agenda 21 agreement, which has generated vast amounts of data, which we still have to actually finish processing, and then an initiative which is the cycles of municipal intercomparison. I can't remember whether it was that or whether it was, I don't remember which of the names it was, but which has been published God knows how many times, which accumulates data from the waste collection services and street cleaning services. Up until recently, we were talking about some 40-something local authorities, and this last year it's increased to some 60. Historical data from many years, based on some 60 indicators. So, all of the data, this is what is most important. So when we talk about climate change, we're talking about euros, because in general, the policies for mitigation represent saving. Policies for adaptation do represent a saving, but require a period of amortization, a long-term period, so it's not so clear, but it does happen in the long term. But we're also talking about improvements to the environment, but I wanted to give a role to other factors, which I believe to be equally important. Let's see if I get this right. No? Oh, no, come back. Mitigation and adaptation to climate change, in addition to having all of these virtues, is also a question of social equity and territorial equity. To us, this is a very important issue, and I would imagine that to you too. Okay, so social equity. We have a tool which calculates the vulnerability of each local authority to climate change. It's a simple tool, and then to incorporate this data into the action plan for sustainability, we need to carry out field work to hone the results and to ensure that they are completely comparable. But as an initial approach, it's valid. So we've used this tool for the counties of Baixo Llobregat, Barcelonès, and Vallès Oriental y Occidental. Basically because, you know, there's a question of the family income available, which is masked because there are many local areas with the same income. In these areas, which have the highest population, some 78%, we've shown the details on family income and vulnerability. The result is a qualitative analysis. It's not quantitative. I haven't found a regression factor that enables us to interpret it. It probably does exist, but that is not our goal when we do a model of this kind. But basically, on a visual level, we can see clearly that those authorities which are most vulnerable, where there is most, it's where income is lowest. And those that have the highest income is where there is the lowest vulnerability. There are these four possibilities that you can see here, and it's distributed like this. It's important because the available family income is an indicator of the economic resources that the city hall will have and indicates the need or not for correction. This is another similar graph using the same tool, but basically vulnerability to heat waves. Obviously, this is basically young people, people with chronic disease, and the elderly. With the increasing number of tropical nights, we are beginning to see health issues and, in extreme cases, a higher level of mortality. Here, we repeat the same pattern as in the case of the available family income. It was only to be expected, but we needed to demonstrate it. So it's divided unequally between the different areas, so that those in the higher income areas are less vulnerable to heat waves, while those with the lowest income are more vulnerable, okay? So this is done with the data from the circles, and this is a relationship between the per capita income, not the available family income. This is another economic indicator calculated in a different way, I'm not sure how, but this is what comes in the circles, and we compare this with emissions. So in this case, it's not as clear or pretty as the other, because we have a lot fewer cases in the analysis, which spreads it out more, but it's also showing the same kind of trends, so that the authorities with the highest income families emit less greenhouse gases, while those in the lower income groups, the towns that emit most greenhouse gas emissions are those which are in the lowest income quadrant. So this is all in terms of social equity. It's an important issue. Recently, it's come to the stage with the issue of energy poverty, which can be seen in winter, and we need to look at the measures also that can be taken with heat waves. I don't think we can resolve these by refrigeration, which would be the industrial option, but we have to find a way of doing it either by refurbishing buildings, by moving the population to new homes, but at all events we need to find a measure. So let's focus now on territorial equity, which is also important. In Barcelona, most of the population lives in towns, basically along the coast and around the demographic core of Barcelona city. Despite everything, there's a significant percentage of the population that don't live in these areas, that live in small towns, maybe close to Barcelona, but in small towns, in medium-sized and small towns in the more distant counties, and climate change affects the two areas differently. Basically because here we look at the problem from the point of view of the size of the town. Most of the small towns with low populations are to be found in those counties most distant to the demographic center of gravity, which is the coast. This is really beginning to be chronic, my lack of control here. So this is the cost of mitigating a ton of CO2 per inhabitant according to the size of the municipality. One is euro per inhabitant in terms of the cost of the action, and in purple we can see the euros it costs per ton of CO2. It's scandalous. It's been done on the basis of 250 action plans for sustainable energy, and we can see clearly that in a small town, mitigating a ton of CO2 is going to cost it, I mean, obviously, the precision of this estimation could be doubted, but which costs it several times more than it would cost a large township. Okay, I think I got it right this time. Okay, these are the per capita emissions of waste management according to the different population groups. Now, here we're going to be talking basically about actions affecting the emission of waste, and we can see that per capita, the smaller townships, it would seem, actually emit more waste. This is also related to questions of selective collections, economies of scale, and efficiency in terms of a dispersed territory. At all events, it is a mix of territorial and social balance, the fact that a small township requires exactly the same tools as would a large one to be able to successfully manage its waste in a, I was going to say, a correct way. But on the other hand, if we look at public lighting, we do see variations, despite the fact that smaller towns emit more CO2 per capita, because apart from anything, there are many dispersed town centres covering large areas, thus lighting is not so intensive. There are not so many inhabitants per point of light as there would be in a more dense population. And we can also see clearly that between 2005 and 2012, the local authorities have made a significant effort basically to reduce the euro cost, I'm afraid. I mean, we just got to accept that. But despite everything, this euro are translated in terms of the mitigation of CO2. And in towns of up to 5,000 inhabitants, they've made a significant effort so that 30% of the reduction over the 2 years corresponds to these kind of towns. So this now is the end, explaining the results and the importance of the analysis of the study and the focusing policies towards social and territorial equity as part of climate change strategy. So in Barcelona County Council, we're focusing our efforts around our local authorities for the climate and energy, I'm not sure which way round it is, by developing action plans in pro of sustainable energy and climate. To us, it's important because it makes a small city equivalent to a large one without resources to one with resources. The impact of the mayors has some 6,600 members, plus a large number who have not been able to complete the plans within the period, and which not only is admitted by the European Union, but also includes other European countries, East Europe, the south of the Mediterranean, and Central Africa that uses this tool. What is important is that it is not a tool for large capitals, because the goal of the County Council is territorial balance, which could include Montagnola, which has, 400 or 500 inhabitants. Anyone here from Monterola who could correct me? But, it's nowhere near 1,000. I think it's under 500. So that they could have their sustainable energy plant, and for Barcelona to do this as well. And the fact that this may seem trite, but it's an important question in terms of territorial balance. And I think they also do want, though, in respect to other initiatives. We put this on the cover of our plans. It's a vision focusing on Barcelona. We can see the towns here. There are areas in Berguedà to the north where it's very sparsely inhabited, and then we have the coast below where there are many millions of inhabitants. In the case of Europe, I think it would be similar, basically, because also the countries of the south have signed up to this more than those to the north, and those to the north have their own thematic plans. So they weren't motivated by this. So, no, I keep on going backwards instead of forwards. So thank you very much. I hope that I haven't saddened you too much with this rather sad presentation. Thank you.
Vamos a cambiar ahora el foco, vamos a ponerlo.
Okay, we're going to change the focus now and go to La Paz in Bolivia. We have Giovanni Gemiomente from the municipal regulation system from La Paz, and we're going to, with him, be looking at how things work in Bolivia, specifically La Paz.
Buenas tardes, tengan todas y todos.
Afternoon. I've been invited to talk a little bit about the social impact of integrated management of solid waste in La Paz. To give you a background, we have the head of government of Bolivia in La Paz. It's the capital. It's right in the middle of the Altiplano, so it's in a sink, if you like, in the Altiplano. It's very cold. And as you can imagine, here you see in the picture and the quality of life that we have in La Paz. It's a beautiful place, but it also has many dangers. And this type of house that's on these 90-degree slopes jeopardizes not just integrated management of basins and rivers. There are 360 rivers that flow at the bottom of the whole city. But also, it poses a challenge. We have a challenge facing us as a municipal government for integrated management of solid waste, unifying all of the waste that the city produces as solid waste. So we are seeking to solve all of these problems one by one to give our population better quality of life as well as our floating population. We only recycle 4% of all of the waste that we generate, which is about 560,000 tons. We have about a population of about 1 million and a floating population of about 200,000. Generation per capita is half a kilo per inhabitant per year, so we're below South American standards. We daily collect then 560 tons of solid waste then. We've carried out a study to categorize this urban waste. Every 5 years we do that to really pinpoint the medium and long-term waste collection strategies. We also have 100% cover of sweeping and waste collection. We think that we have one of the best sanitary landfills, which is located in Alpacoma. Climate helps there. We have temperatures that fluctuate between 20 and 40 degrees in just a single day. So it's not too high or too low, which would be a risk for this type of waste treatment. We have another sanitary landfill which has been closed now. It was closed 10 years ago, and we have an environmental audit underway that will really show how we should be managing waste for the coming years. Now, when we were thinking about social impact indicators, we've taken into account 3 of what we think are the most important. Firstly, the 1,100 workers that were working up to 6-7 months ago, which was outsourcing its service, that had never had their labor rights enshrined on paper. So, as part of our basic contracting, we have established a company's obligation to recontract 100% of the workers, giving them not just legal certainty, not just to the workers, but also to the company, which will exactly show how many workers it employs. Secondly, separators. I've given you, I have a photo on this. This is the way in which plastic bottle separators work every day in collecting this type of waste, transporting it to the border with Peru, which is 2.5 hours by road away. And they do this recycling and transport work every single day. And I'll come back to this in a little while. Lastly, public, around 700,000 people, who play an important role in these social impact indicators. And so they're receiving a new service since a month ago with this side loading, which is one of our new methodologies that we're using in the city. So, with separators, in the whole of Bolivia, we have around 10,000 permanent waste collectors that work every day collecting solid urban waste, another 10,000 non-permanent or temporary who are just hired for specific needs. And in La Paz, there are about 1,000 people who do this daily plastic bottle separation. And what's interesting here is that 85% of those are women. And mostly they are the breadwinners for their household. Since 2006, we've been working to identify these people, to get closer to them, them set up micro companies of plastic bottle collection, which they take to Peru, where they're used for transformation. Where they were used until business broke down with Bolivia because of variation in oil prices, and the Peruvian government has now seen that it has to subsidize purchase of these PET bottles. We've also set up 20 green points, as you can see in the picture, where we collect various types of material. That's what we're doing right now. Soon we're going to have 100 of these, but they'll be better equipped to enable a better service. Unfortunately, I do have to say that we don't have national regulations on company obligations when it comes to extended social responsibility, but we are working on this, and we hope that soon we will have that regulatory framework which will allow us to make these improvements. In the last picture, you can see our classification plant in the Alpacoma sanitary landfill site, which has allowed us to improve the service, empower a public company also, which has generated resources for the city by generating these plastic separated waste. And lastly, we've been implementing more containers in the city. As I mentioned, we had a teething problem with this, which was resistance to change, because this has been satanized, if you like, this idea as a concept. Our metallic containers, unfortunately, didn't enable a good surface. They were sources of infections. On the one hand, they created smells and vectors. And so people were really against all types of container because of this. So we had to an initial problem with the new containers, because people were used to the old ones, the door-to-door containers, and obviously they found it easier to dump their rubbish wherever other than inside these containers. Now, what we've done then is work very much on awareness raising and educating people. And we do have some outcomes already of this awareness raising and education. In the first session we've got 180 points that said to in the first week. From the third week we've just got there are just 2 more of the old points to close. Now we think this is improving people's lives, and that's basically what we're setting out to do. The social impact then has been positive, because in addition to creating a clean neighborhood, we've had hundreds of letters from other neighborhoods requesting that they also have this service. We have cutting-edge technology also. which is allowing us to improve services and also apply this service to 100% of solid urban waste to respond to the diagnosis of waste management that we carried out 2 or 3 years ago and that we're now carrying out. In addition, progress has been made in regulations and regulation on solid urban waste. We have a nationwide program for management and integration. We've created a sufficient legal framework for integrated solid waste management for La Paz. We have a better labor and human resources use. We have appropriate internal organization for supervision and regulation of these companies. And this raft of good measures allows us to conclude that we're going through a very important time for this type of service. We hope to be able to correct any errors very quickly so that we can provide the best service possible for the city. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias, señor Giovanni. Me gustaría hacerles una
Very much, Giovanni. I've got a question, and I would like to ask you to reflect on this as well. Do you realize how many wonderful, amazing ideas, projects, things that just stay on a back burner because we're unable to communicate them properly? Are you aware of how important it is to be able to talk about things properly? How important it is to communicate impact? What is it? Basically, the idea of impact communication is to provoke, to create an environmental awareness. And, you know, we need this motivation to make people listen to us, to make these people that are listening to us to move. That's the only way we'll manage to change things. That's why it's so important for us to work on this. It's key. It's key to creating an environmental awareness and to establish this circular economy. Today, you're going to have the chance to see a great example of how to communicate, to cause debate, discussion, because we're going to be lucky enough to listen, which is the best thing we can do, to one of those people who does this with great passion and skill and manages to impact people. So, Mr. Don Luis Gallego, he's an engineer, a naturalist, an environmental consultant. He also works with different media and has won many awards and distinctions for his work. Somebody who believes in what he does and knows how to talk about it to get you to follow him. So I'm going to leave you now with José Luis Gallego. Thank you very much. Well, thank you all very much. You've had a long day. I've heard that the sessions have been very dense, so we're going to try and wind up with a little laughter. And I'm going to shake you up. I'm going to awaken your awareness. Because the way Maribel has introduced me, I really appreciate it, because that's precisely what I wanted to achieve, and that's what my foundation wants to achieve with this. So you have a certain tendency to talk just to yourselves, to be endogamious, forgetting about the millions of people that are out there on the other side of these walls. And everything that you attempt to do, if nobody communicates it, nothing is going to happen. Paraphrasing Leonard Cohen, you know that Leonard Cohen was this poet that sung instead of writing his verses, who unfortunately we lost last year. He said that any system that you set up without us will be destroyed. So, you know, I say the same. Anything that you talk about here today, if you don't communicate it, will fail. And what are we doing to communicate all of these very important things that you're saying here? Look, we who work on environmental divulgation in politics, companies. We invent words, we use them, and we bombard our citizens with words that we do not decode and which we use so happily as if everybody understood what we mean by energy efficiency or smart cities. Can you tell me if a Logroño taxi driver who's picked up a lady who's going to the hairdressers and they suddenly hear on the radio say, well, Madrid's becoming a smart city, or Bolivia is setting up new models to promote selective waste collection? It's an awful error. And we're not being solidary with it, because what makes us human is to acquire and convey culture. And in forums such as this, what happens is you share your ideas, but you do not communicate them, and that is not fair. I'm going to talk to you about a concept which personally is I find amazing, which is a great concept which has been terribly communicated. It's the question of sustainable development. All of you have heard it, have used the expression, probably daily. But do you know exactly how to communicate to society what sustainable development is? In the Brundtland report, it was first coined in 1987, which was called the Brundtland report, because it was led by the ex-Prime Minister of Norway, Harlem Brundtland, and she said that sustainable development permits us to satisfy the present needs without placing in risk future needs. Okay, the word of God. That was it. That was the communication. But was it necessary to tie together so many concepts to invent an expression such as this, which we all knew in all of our countries, from Latin America to Europe, that we all knew how to actually practice sustainable development? I mean, my grandmother, who came from the province of Cuenca, a depressed area in the middle of Spain, she'd already practiced sustainable development for many years. She said to me, son, if you want to eat eggs all year round, don't put the chicken in the pot. This is the concept that we have to convey, with all of my respect to Paul Gro-Harlem Brundtland and to all of the politicians of the UN, the European Commission, who invent these terms and present them to society. And now another one. Here we go. Careful. Circular economy. But I think this one is particularly interesting because this is the mother of all concepts. It is this that can help us to revert the situation of environmental wastage and the disconnection between production and the exhaustion of natural resources. That's why it's important that when you use this concept, you make sure that it reaches people and they understand it, because this is true. The rest of it, this is very important for all of our citizens to understand and to adopt it. A circular economy is an ancient thing, something that we're seeing in the woods around this beautiful town of Mataro, which are the coastal woodlands, which unfortunately we're not going to be able to visit. But if you do come here again, don't forget about the nature that surrounds us. Barcelona is a wonderful city, and the province of Barcelona has the most amazing places around it, including the mountain ranges that cover the edge of the coast. And this is what's happening. In the woodlands, there are these circular economies. There's no waste, there's no garbage, there's no rubbish. There's no plants of energy valorization, which is what some of you call the incinerators, which I believe to be essential facilities with the way our society runs, given that recycling is not sufficient and we are closing landfills. Whether we like it or not, we're going to need these for a long time. But in nature, there's no need for it. They're not set up there because nature works on its own. The concept of a circular economy is out there. And that's why it's important for us to be clear about it. To move from a linear economy to produce, use, waste, throw away, produce, use, waste, throw away, which sounds like, the Charlie Chaplin film, to a circular economy, which is to produce, distribute, use, recuperate, recycle, produce, distribute, and so on and so forth. It sounds marvelous. To understand this, let's look at nature, which is what I'm attempting to do. In a few minutes, I'm going to give you a summary of the talk that I give all over Spain to attempt to explain what this means, a circular economy. I'm giving this talk in universities, in large corporations, in business schools, believe it or not. And this is what I say, that at all events, to explain the concept of a circular economy, I use recycling. I do, and so does the European Commission, which has approved this concept of the circular economy in terms of recycling. Those residue waste, which is not rubbish, explains the concept of the circular economy. Look, an aluminium can, which many of you use and work with every day. You'll understand that it's not garbage. It has a value which comes from a product, an extraordinarily complex product that comes from the earth, aluminium. Do any of you know what mineral or what kind of rock aluminium comes from? Well, I'm sorry, we can't hear the gentleman if he doesn't use the microphone. This question I asked in the University of Seville a couple of weeks ago with kids who were studying environmental sciences, and I almost committed suicide that very moment. In effect, aluminium in the 19th century, I don't know if you know this, this is Napoleon III. Napoleon III, who was the last king of France, became famous, entered into posterity because in addition to being the first president of the Republic, he made his jewels out of aluminium, and he made aluminium sell at the same price as gold, because aluminium, in effect, comes from this stone, the bauxite. When I show this to kids, they're disappointed. They'd expected something bright and shiny that looks like metal. How could it come from something like this and we use it for this? These cookies, these stains are oxides that give us alumina, and this gives us aluminium. So he used this to make jewels, to make the treasure of the Queen. No, we use it to make cans. We're so smart. Where are the bauxite mines on the planet? Look at this. These are the main regions that produce bauxite. Many of you are familiar with them because you come from countries that produce bauxite. But I'm going to take you to one specific area, a marvelous region. If there were a naturalist here, they would be on their knees, such as when an art lover goes to Florence, they start to cry as they go into the city, the region of the Great Lakes of Central Africa. And we recognize this natural park, and when we see it, it's so exciting. This is the biggest national park in the world, and this national park coincides with where the main bauxite mines in Central Africa are. Why is this the most important national park in the world? In that park, we see Ricardo. He's not having such a good time. We know that the mountain gorillas, we're losing them. They're the species which is going to become extinct, of the first of the large apes to disappear. I mean, okay, but the thing is that Ricardo and I and you, and I'm sorry, there's virtually no difference between us in evolution. I mean, he turned out to be a gorilla, I turned out to be a man, just by coincidence. We're not cousins, we are brothers. Moreover, I know some... Well, let's leave it there, shall we? Ricardo is not having a very good time of it at the moment because there's no return. The International Union for the Preservation of Nature places the mountain gorilla on the edge of extinction. Your grandchildren are probably going to live in a world without mountain gorillas. But the question, of Grandpa, what was a mountain gorilla like? They're going to make you feel uneasy. This is the Virunga, the national park of the Virunga. And you'll think, well, yeah, it looks very large. You could have lots of bauxite mines here. This is a bauxite mine, in effect. This is what I said the first time that I saw this picture. Just to give you an idea of the scale of the tragedy, that little dot in front of the truck is a human person. And, I mean, we'd be terrified if we had one of these trucks in front of us. And there are dozens and dozens of these in the Virunga Park. And you say, well, could we live without aluminium? Do we have to, we could renounce it? Could we do that so that Ricardo survived? It's impossible. The human has an uncontrollable will to make our lives complicated. The case of aluminium is the case in point. It's a very versatile material. It offers us great comfort. I mean, even medical advances wouldn't have occurred without the applications we can use aluminium for. But how do we see the growth of the use of aluminium over coming years? Ricardo, does he have a chance that people are going to forget about aluminium and leave him in peace? Or, is this the end of him? So, well, things are going pretty well. Things were going pretty well until the Chinese turned up, because the Chinese, also want to have their aluminium watches, their aluminium cars, their aluminium cans. So aluminium is, the use of aluminium is going to go crazy over the coming years. You've seen where the bauxite mines are. But do you know where the biggest bauxite mine in the world is? In effect, in the recycling plants. What's going on? Why are we not able to forget about mining bauxite for once and for all, and to recover all of the aluminium that's already out of the ground? The concept of the death of resources where petrol is falling off in terms of price, but according to the experts, there is more bauxite in the form of cans than there is under the core of the earth, under the crust of the earth. So why don't we recover this material? That's what we have to tell people for them to understand the concept of a circular economy. That if you take something like Mireia said, we have to put our heart and soul into it. We don't have to just theorize about it and achieve these wonderful conclusions, write a report and publish it in PDF and send it round to everyone. No, we have to go and talk to people about it, to the taxi driver, to the hairdresser, the trainer in the gym, to my mother, to everybody, because everybody, we can cause a reaction. Pilar Chiva gave us the figures before in the fall of the consumption of plastic bags. It's because of the excellent campaign, the communication campaign that there was. And people said, okay, we've got to, start working on this. So when the citizen reaches this, so that's why, people are in La Paz are not putting their plastic bags in the containers, because you're not explaining to them what they have to do. If they want a clean city, why should they dump the bag outside of the container? There's an error in terms of communication. Please don't get angry with me. I'm telling you this because, you are capable of communication. Communication is essential. Politicians know this better than anybody. Our ideas have to be communicated. We don't just have to have or execute ideas, but we have to talk about them. the aluminium that comes from the recycling plant is the same as what we get directly from bauxite. With a couple of important things in this forum, which is dedicated to the circular economy and climate change. So of every 4 tons of bauxite, we get 2 tons of aluminium. From each 2, we get 1 of aluminium. 4 cans recycled produces 4 tons of cans of aluminium again. So it's infinite. It can be recycled as many times as we want. An aluminium can be recycled as many times as we want. It can be turned into a hub for a BMW. It can be turned into a swatch. It can be turned into a shutter or a microphone. Recycling aluminium uses 95% less energy than it does to obtain bauxite. Anyone can understand this. There's a terrible waste if we produce bauxite. To melt an aluminium can, you can do it with a spoon and a cigarette lighter. For each ton of recycled aluminium, we avoid emitting 10 tons of CO2 into the atmosphere. I don't know if you can, make these calculations and thinking, how can I offset the use of a plane when I'm coming over here? I mean, look at this. I mean, how we can affect global warming by just recycling our aluminium cans. And then at the end, if your interlocutor says, look, what Ricardo says, I couldn't care less about it, because I couldn't care less about nature. I love technology. I trust science. But what about the economy? Go to the website, the European Commission website. It's the 60th anniversary of this marvelous invention, the European Union, the Treaty of the European Union, which, brought Spain delights in terms of the environment and nature. My country has taken such an enormous step forward thanks to the European institutions. For those of us that work in the environment, nature, we are the lovers of the European Union. Go to the excellent packet on the circular economy that the European Commission has designed on its website, inspired on the management of waste, on the work. Look, in one of the slides on this information package, whether you're interested in ecology or not, whether you're interested in the environment or not, as Bill Clinton's advisor said to him when he won against George Bush, the father, the elder, with the Desert Storm, with General Schwarzkopf, who terrified you just to look at him. And Bill Clinton said, look, it's the economy, stupid, and he won. It is the economy, stupid. For each 10 tons of waste generated, if we incinerate it, we create 1 job. If we send it to a landfill, we create 6 jobs. If we recycle it, we create 36 jobs. Okay? It's work. It's the economy. Whether you are interested in the environment or not, it's for you. Maybe your kids will end up being waste managers. When I was young, my mother said to me, look, kid, if you're going to get this kind of, marks at school, you're going to end up collecting garbage. Today, being a dustman is one of the most noble, one of the most essential jobs for the proper functioning of our society. Therefore, I feel a great respect for the work of waste managers. And to wind up, the great obstacle that you're going to find in La Paz to achieve awareness amongst your citizens is that the small gesture is powerful, but they've got to be voluntary. We can only move forward if we do this for ourselves, because of everything that we're talking about here today. It's not the environment, it's not climate change or circular economy. We're talking about being civil, to live in a world which is better, where we all live a slightly better life. Thank you all very much for your attention.
Una de las máximas precisamente de la comunicación.
One of the maxims of communication is don't say everything you can show. And I think José Luis Gallego is a real great example of communicating and provoking. So maybe now we can share with him and our other last speakers some experiences and ask questions. Can we have a microphone for the person here who wishes to ask a question? If you do want to ask a question, please put your hand up so we can see you. Hi, good afternoon. It's not so much a question as a thought. Firstly, many thanks to all of these speakers. It's been fascinating. But I want to share a thought on the social challenge. 50%, if not more, of people who live on the planet are women. And unfortunately, of the 12 speakers we've heard today, only one was a woman.
Sí que de deciros que lo hemos anunciado también, es verdad, Nora Padilla.
That is true. I must say that Nora Padilla couldn't come because of circumstances in her country, we'll say, but that is true. It's true, and it's an important thought that we should leave. Participant. Yes, it happens all over. Everywhere I go, practically. Sadly, I don't always take the mic to say something like this, but I hope this is going to change in coming years. Even the people who are here, the participants, I would say roughly about 30% of us are women. Probably we're more now because women tend to stick things out a bit longer than men, right to the end.
Aparte de esto, muchísimas
gracias. Thank you very much, José Luis. I loved your presentation, and thanks also to the others. But while I've got the floor, actually what I'm going to do is a little video clip for the social media, and hopefully I can do my bit in communicating everything we've been talking about here within these four walls better. The social media are a brilliant tool. Do you agree? I mean, it's really, it's basically what we have all over the world. You've got good voices, bad voices. You hear the bad voices more because they shout more, but they're a great platform. And I think it's an opportunity that's come down to all of us who are involved in telling people about the environment. Until now, people were saying we were mad dreamers that nobody was interested in. And actually, we are gaining social power. And when you do, you get higher, and there are an increasing number of people who are interested in what you're talking about right here. So it's important that part of your job is communication. Would you agree? Absolutely. The role of women is essential. It's decisive, firstly. We've received education from two types of people. A teacher would say there's a strong sex, one who does things, and the stronger sex, even the men. But in fact, he would often say that it's women who lead their families forward. And we see that today, and we realize the vital role that women play. And as to social networks, it's the only place we can really be who we want to be.
Por aquí, perfecto.
Hola, sí. Mi nombre es Gerardo Lagos.
Gerardo Largos. I'm from the Association of Municipalities of Janquiwe in southern Chile. I'm grateful to be here with you at this conference. I'd like to just pick up on what my fellow delegate has just mentioned on women's participation. Within the association, in our Association of Municipalities, I was part in a regional committee on environmental education where only 5% of that regional committee are men. The rest are women. Women who've got their shirt on as educators, environmental teachers, who are seeking specifically to teach children in basic education and higher education as well. So we certainly recognize the role of women in our region. Just a point, if I may. We're very mindful, we women are very mindful of the problem, and we're certainly working in the front line of this problem and environmental awareness. And I think what our fellow delegate was saying, that apart from just working at the grassroots, women also need to be heard at the top. They need to have a voice and a face at an event like this. I think that's what she was saying. Yes, absolutely. Just a question on José Luis to teach us in communication. I am lacking in this. I need to know how to communicate with the public better to raise awareness. We have an association in Chile, and studies have shown that community isn't really engaged with their city. We don't protect it, we make it dirty, we damage it. And we've seen this from the colleague in La Paz as well, actually. So how can we educate children? It's vital. Can it be through a game, through a little talk, images? We can do that more easily with children, but how can we raise awareness amongst adults more? Answer. I was a part of a radio program which has huge audience figures, and on Fridays here in Spain, people really listen to the radio a lot on Fridays. They're on their way to their holiday homes, and they're listening to it while they're in the car often. And the presenter of the program, Julia Ortega, a great journalist and communicator, said when we started working together 10 years ago, said, never use the word sustainable. I ban it. And I thought that was an obstacle at the first, but it became an opportunity. Those words that I showed you, those buzzwords that I showed you at the start, we've started to use them as crutches. So when you're trying to explain a concept about energy saving, you say savings, but people talk about, think of savings related to turning things off and money and so on. Energy efficiency, but they don't understand that. And they don't understand low-carbon economy. But look at what an important concept that is. So I invite you to ban yourself from using this type of word, even at the risk of many of you thinking that I was a fisherman rather than an environmentalist because I put that picture of a chicken next to Grow Harlem, sorry. But even at the risk of that, it's vital, as Koplinski said, who was a god when it came to journalism. If you don't connect with people, don't say anything. There's no news. What's most important is to connect to your audience. So I use sentimental crutches. Obviously, that doesn't mean we don't have to be academically rigorous. But every sphere, every discipline has its own rigor. And in the academic field, you can use another type of language and discourse in academia. But when you're talking to the average man on the street or woman on the street, use the lowest denominator possible, I think. Another question from the audience. Let's have the microphone, please.
Gracias. Soy
Joan Puigdellers. I'm here as a former councillor in the Provincial and City Council of Barcelona. I've taken part in 4 of the 5 Relagres conferences. I think everything that we've done today is vital. I want to make that clear. But the reference to communication in environmental studies is most important. Two examples of this. This morning, it was said that the Provincial Council of Barcelona has just published a book commemorating the 40 years of environmental education in Catalonia. Started 40 years ago with Santiga Nature Path, which is woods close to Terrassa, nearby here. And we're now celebrating 40 years of environmental education. When the regional government of Catalonia faced one of the most serious problems of political criticism that it's had in its history, which was probably the reaction to a waste treatment plan in the 90s, they decided to create a regional ministry for environment, which was, and that set up a bylaw for environmental education and promotion. And that's what we could call a circular economy, as we call it in today's terms. We learned something that you have clearly shown in your presentation. Communicating and educating are vital, but they must be effective. And to do that, we have to go to people's hearts. Not their heads with figures and stats and so on. Stats are important here because most of us here are professionals who work in this sector. But when you're addressing the public at large, you have to address them. You have to address their hearts. And I think your intervention, sir, was a very clear example on how we have to communicate, which is how we're going to bring about a change of attitude. One last word. When I was Director General of Environmental Education, we came up with a TV program which was called Capitan Siam and Siam, or Captain Lettuce in English. And this captain gave tips, 3-minute tips aimed at the public at large. And people still actually remember, and people say to me, I remember Captain Lettuce, even now, all these years on. So it's that type of thing that can help to change society in this and other such vital areas. So certainly, I think we do need to really prioritize communication. Thank you very much.
No sé si por allá, si tenemos más intervenciones, vamos a acercarles el...
More questions over there? Okay, let's have the mic, please. Good afternoon. Salim Moreno, a regional councillor for the Metropolitan Region of Santiago. One of the questions that we've put to ourselves with our other colleagues here has to do with how we engage with the community and raise awareness and get people to feel that treating waste at the origin will help them more than this altruistic view of the environment and conservation. How can we raise awareness among people so that people feel that they're winning, not just thinking about the future of the planet, but more immediately, how can we make it attractive to people? And we raise this question because you've moved forward far further than we have, and certainly you must have looked at this at some point. We can come up with a recycling program, but if we don't have the origin, if we don't have the people, then obviously all of the efforts and all of the investment will be for nothing. Perhaps the answer is simple, but we have really been wondering how we can get people on board and get them to treat materials at the origin. Answer. they're not strategic partners, but they are your partners, these people, far more than the council, than the county council, than the state. Your partner is a citizen. If citizens don't stop at home to do this, then it's all going to go out the window. In a football match between Madrid and Barca, we had this conversation with some university students. Who is the most important of the 23 players on the match, on the pitch, Messi or Ronaldo? That's why I say 23. The most important is the ref. There's no match without a referee. Messi can be injured and go off, and Ronaldo can as well. But if there's no referee, there's no match. And the referee is the citizen here, the person, the individual, in your case. If you don't address the referee, then you're not going to get anywhere, because these people don't feel engaged. This is the thing with these bags. When you see these bags, or when you see a bit of rubbish next to a rubbish bin, as Garcia Lorca said, I have a flash goes through me, because I can't fathom how somebody can have done that. People aren't educated. We haven't got them on board. We need to make more efforts. We're doing that to make them do sport, to eat less sugar, to take part in the institutions. But what about the planet? And our efforts for people to take the environment seriously. Now, I'm an optimist, because in our society today, no, we don't. Newspapers don't go under. There aren't radio programs without environmental journalists. That was unthinkable 20 years ago. But now content that we have to do on nature, environment, air quality, waste management, safe access to water, these are all key issues, because people are increasingly interested in them. And that's why I think you have to make the effort to connect with the people. And I see where you come from. If I close my eyes, I can see, I can imagine beautiful landscapes, beautiful nature. Perhaps connect them to that. Nature is a great, it's a great tool. It's very seductive. It's a real draw to people. And I can tell you about our little woods and forests here, which are tiny compared to the nature and the forests that you have in your countries. Perhaps use them.
Tenemos más preguntas. Creo por esa zona había otra persona.
More questions over there. Somebody else wanted to make a point or ask a question? No more? Okay, well, I think we should really make this our take-home message. It's not just what to tell, but how we tell it, how we connect with people, how we provoke, how we get that reaction. Whenever you can take up a microphone and talk before the public, make sure something happens afterwards. Think about what you would like to be told yourself, to have to do something. And as José Luis says, it's not about speaking to idiots, but maybe think about it as speaking to children, people who don't know what we're talking about, but, are interested. Tell them about it. And you come from countries, as we've just heard again, with beautiful landscapes. Where are the pictures of those landscapes and that natural beauty that you have? We could have seen them, and we could have seen how they've evolved or how they've been damaged over time because they haven't been looked after. Use those to tell the people and to buck this trend. I hope very much that the day, albeit intense, has been very useful to you. And I hope really that you do go out and tell people what's happening, because this does have to go forward. And you are very much part of that army that I mentioned at the start. And you are the people who can help change things. Tomorrow, as you know, we are starting at 9 sharp. You have your networking coffees. Do register if you haven't yet. You can do that online. We also have the trip to the plant. And I hope you enjoy it. I hope you enjoy Mataró, and I hope you enjoy the conference. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.